I keep the folder in the top drawer of my desk now. Not filed away, not tucked into the accordion binder where I keep closing documents and commission statements. Just sitting right there, face up, where I see it every morning when I sit down to work. It's a single page. Cream-colored, slightly waxy the way notarized documents always are, with a raised seal in the bottom left corner and 2 signatures on the line above it. One of them is Patty's. Neat, looping, the kind of handwriting they taught in Catholic school in the 60s. The other one is mine, except I didn't write it. I was in a hospital bed when that pen touched that paper. I was 3 days post-surgery, on enough medication that I couldn't have told you my own zip code. And somehow my name is right there, in ink, on a legal document that changed the ownership of my home. I want to tell you everything because I spent a long time thinking I was imagining things. I was not imagining a single thing. My name is Rachel. I've been a licensed real estate agent in Boise, Idaho for 9 years, and if there is one thing this job teaches you, really teaches you, not just the coursework version but the in-your-bones version, it's that the document is the truth. Not what someone said, not what someone promised, not what everyone in the room agrees they remember. The document is the truth. I built my entire professional life around that principle, which is maybe why it took me so long to apply it at home. Craig and I got married 6 years ago in September at a small venue outside of Eagle with string lights and a live bluegrass band and a guest list of exactly 44 people. It was exactly what I wanted. Craig is an electrical contractor, steady, patient, the kind of man who fixes things before you have to ask. We met at a closing, actually. He was there for a client. I was the buyer's agent, and we ended up talking in the parking lot for 45 minutes about the Treasure Valley real estate market and whether the growth was sustainable. It was a very romantic beginning. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, and when we started talking about buying a house, I told him I wanted to handle it entirely myself. He said, and I will always love him for this, he said, "Rachel, I would trust you to buy me a house in the dark." And I thought, this is the person I want to build something with. I did not know yet how much that word build was going to cost us. We found our place in late spring of our first married year. A 1950s craftsman bungalow in a subdivision off Ustic Road. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, original hardwood floors that had been painted over at some point in the 90s, a galley kitchen that had not been updated since approximately the Carter administration, and a backyard with a massive old apple tree that dropped fruit every August without fail. It needed work. It needed a lot of work. But the bones were right, and the price was right, and I knew, the way you know sometimes with a property, that it was ours. That's when Patty arrived. I mean, Patty had always been there. She's Craig's mother. She lives 12 minutes from us in a tidy rancher off Cloverdale that she has owned since 1987, and she is, by any external measure, the kind of mother-in-law women in my neighborhood describe as a blessing. She brings food. She remembers birthdays not just for the people but for the dates that matter, the anniversary of Craig's father passing, the date I got my broker's license. She volunteers for things before you know you need a volunteer. When we closed on the house and I handed Craig the keys in that ridiculous ceremonial way real estate agents do even when they're the buyer, Patty cried. Real tears. She put her hand over her heart and said, "This is everything. This is just everything." And I looked at her and felt, I don't know, something that wasn't quite warmth. Something that was warm on the surface and strange underneath. Like a lake in August that's hot at the top and cold 3 feet down. The first thing she did, the thing I filed away and then unfiled and then filed away again, happened about 2 weeks after we moved in. I was working a Saturday showing and Craig was at the house doing demo work on the kitchen, pulling cabinets, exposing the plumbing situation, the usual first phase of any renovation. Patty had apparently stopped by to bring lunch. Nothing unusual. When I got home that evening, there was a contractor's business card on the kitchen counter with a sticky note in Patty's handwriting. Terry Glover, very fair, did the Hendersons' addition. I picked it up and looked at it and looked at Craig, who was pulling a splinter out of his palm and not particularly paying attention, and I said, "Did I ask for a contractor recommendation?" And Craig said, "She was just trying to help, Ratch." And I said, "I know," because I did know, and I put the card down, and I told myself I was being precious about it. A business card is a business card. I tucked it into the folder on the counter where we were collecting renovation paperwork, and I didn't think about it again. I still have that sticky note. It's clipped to the back of the folder in my desk drawer. The renovation took the better part of 2 years, which is normal for an owner-managed project when both people work full-time. Craig did what he could on weekends and after jobs. I managed the contractor schedules around my showing calendar, pulled the permits myself because I knew the process and didn't want to pay a general contractor's markup for paperwork, and generally kept the project moving at the pace that made sense for our budget. Patty came by twice a week, sometimes 3 times. She would bring Craig lunch and stay for 2 hours. She started learning the contractors' names. Not just first names, their wives' names, their kids' names. The electrician's daughter played travel soccer. The tile guy had just refinanced. Patty retained all of it. She was warm and interested in that particular way she had, and the men, they were all men, responded to her the way people respond to a woman who makes them feel attended to. Within 6 months, our job site had a social ecosystem, and Patty was at the center of it. I noticed. I noted it in the way you note a weather pattern. I didn't think it was anything more than what it looked like. A sociable, retired woman with time on her hands and genuine affection for her son's home project. Craig traveled for work twice a year, a trade expo in Portland in March, a supplier conference in Salt Lake in October. The first Portland trip happened about 8 months into the renovation, and before he left, he sat down with me and we talked through what was happening on the job that week. The bathroom tile was being set, the plumber was coming Thursday to rough in the new layout, and there were 2 contractor bids outstanding for the exterior work we were planning for spring. Craig said, "If you need anything while I'm gone, Mom can help coordinate." I said I was fine. He said he knew, but his mother had offered and it would make her feel useful. I said fine. Okay, sure. When Craig got back from Portland, Patty told him in front of me at dinner, in the pleasant way she delivered all information, that she'd called both contractors about the exterior bids and asked them to put together more detailed line items so we could compare them properly. "I just thought it would help you make a better decision," she said. "It's what I always did in the office. You get them to break it down, then you can see where the real costs are." She was right, technically. The detailed bids were more useful. I looked at Craig and Craig looked at his plate and I thought, she called contractors on my behalf about my house without asking me. And Craig said, "That was smart, Mom, thank you." That was the first time Craig's approval cost me something real, because what it cost me was the ability to say what I actually wanted to say, which was, "Who asked you?" I rationalized it. Detailed bids were better. She meant well. I was being territorial about something that didn't need to be a territory. I told myself this, and I believed it, and we moved forward. The second incident was the key. There had always been one spare key at Patty's. Craig gave it to her when we first moved in case of emergency, a perfectly normal thing to do. Sometime around month 10 of the renovation, I noticed a second key on Patty's ring. I saw it when she set her keys on my kitchen counter, a brass key, newer than the others, on a ring with her Costco card and a small laminated photo of Craig at maybe 8 years old. I looked at it and I said, "Patty, is that a key to our house?" And she said, "Oh, Craig had one made for me when the plumber needed access that Tuesday you were both at work. I should have mentioned it." I looked at Craig that night and he said, "It was a one-time thing and then I forgot about it. She won't use it without asking." I said, "She didn't ask for the second one." Craig said, "Rachel, she had to let a plumber in. I'm not going to make my mother ask permission every time she helps us." I sat with that. I sat with the specific way he said it, had to, as if there had been an emergency, as if the situation had required action without consultation. And I thought, he doesn't see it. He genuinely doesn't see it. And I made the second mistake I would make in this story, which was deciding that if he didn't see it, maybe there was nothing to see. Then came the offer to hold the documents. We were about 14 months in, and the paper situation in our house had become genuinely unwieldy. Permits, inspection reports, contractor invoices, material receipts, warranty cards, all of it accumulating in stacks on the dining room table and in folders I kept meaning to organize. Patty came over one Saturday and looked at the table and said, "Honey, I used to manage the office filing system for a 40-person firm for 18 years. Let me just get this organized for you. I'll copy everything, put the originals somewhere safe, make sure nothing gets lost in the shuffle." It sounded so reasonable. It sounded like the exactly right thing. Craig was standing right there nodding like she'd offered to cure a disease. I said I appreciated it, but I'd rather keep the originals at home. Patty said, of course, I'll make copies for myself so I can help with follow-up calls without having to bother you. I said okay. She spent 4 hours at our dining room table with a portable scanner she brought from home. I told myself she was copying invoices so she could call contractors about warranties. I told myself that. And what I didn't know, what I had no way of knowing, was that somewhere in that 4-hour window, she photographed every page of our deed. Our original purchase deed. The one with the legal description of the property, the parcel number, the vesting information. The document you need to prepare a quitclaim deed. I didn't know that for another 7 months. By then, the apple tree had dropped its fruit, and the backyard smelled like fermented apples baking in the late summer heat, and I was sitting at my desk pulling a title report, and everything I thought I understood about the previous 2 years was about to come apart. Here is what I want to say right now, before I tell you the next part. I am a real estate agent. I have explained deed vesting to hundreds of clients. I have walked people through the difference between joint tenancy and tenants in common and community property with right of survivorship, and I have said more times than I can count. The way your name appears on that deed is one of the most consequential decisions you will make in this transaction. I knew all of that. I knew it cold. And it still happened to me. Because the people who do this count on the fact that you have a threshold of suspicion, and they stay just below it until the moment they don't need to anymore. I was admitted to St. Luke's Regional Medical Center on March 11th. Appendicitis, atypical presentation, which is apparently more common than people realize, and which meant my symptoms read as something less urgent for about 36 hours before they didn't. Emergency surgery on the 12th. I was in the hospital through the 16th, and I was on post-operative pain management the entire time in a way that made the days soft and blurred. Craig was there. Patty was there. I remember Patty sitting in the chair by the window on what I think was the 13th or 14th, and she had her hands folded in her lap the way she did when she was being patient, and she said, "You just rest. Everything at the house is handled." I thought she meant the mail. I thought she meant she'd taken the garbage out or watered the plants or fed the neighbor's cat. I said, "Thank you, Patty." She patted my hand. She said, "That's what family does." I want you to sit with that for a second. I want you to remember that line. Because I thought about it later when everything had changed, and what struck me wasn't the malice in it. It was how completely true it was. That is what family does. She just had a different idea of which family she was doing it for. I was home by the 17th and back to a modified work schedule by the end of March. Renovation had paused during my hospitalization. Craig had called everything off while I was in the hospital, which I appreciated, and we picked back up in April. By summer, the major work was done. We had a functional kitchen, a renovated bathroom, and the exterior work was scheduled for fall. The apple tree bloomed late that year, and I remember standing at the kitchen window one morning looking out at the yard and thinking, we built this. We actually built this. It felt, for the first time in 2 years, like something finished. The refinancing idea came from Craig in August. Interest rates had moved in a direction that made a refinance genuinely worthwhile. I ran the numbers myself and agreed. And because I handled all of our property paperwork professionally, I pulled our complete title report as the first step. This is routine. Any real estate professional does this before a refinance. You confirm the vesting. You confirm there are no clouds on title. You confirm the legal description matches what you're refinancing. I sat down at my desk on a Tuesday afternoon in August with a cup of coffee and my laptop, and I pulled up the Ada County Assessor's records and the County Recorder database. The property showed 3 owners. I thought it was an error. I actually laughed, the small, reflexive laugh you make when you're sure something is a data problem, a clerical mistake, a number transposed somewhere. I clicked through to the recorded documents. There were 2 deeds on file for our property. Our original warranty deed from closing, and a quitclaim deed recorded 8 months ago in March, recorded on March 15th, transferring a 25% undivided interest in the property to Patricia Ann Holloway. I sat there looking at it for a long time. The quitclaim listed the grantors as Craig Matthew Holloway and Rachel Lynn Holloway. Both signatures were notarized on March 14th. I pulled up the notarization details. The notary was a woman named Deborah Cross. I knew that name. I had seen it on a business card once, clipped to a contractor invoice. In handwriting, I recognized Terry Glover, very fair. Deborah Cross was the wife of Terry Glover, the contractor Patty had recommended on that sticky note in our very first week in the house. The contractor whose detailed bid we'd used. The contractor who knew Patty by name, whose daughter played travel soccer, whose business had a notary on staff. On March 14th, I was in a hospital bed. I had been in surgery 36 hours earlier. I could not have held a pen. My signature was on that document, not similar to my signature. The particular way I write my capital R, the way my last name runs together. She had 18 months of my documents. She had seen my signature on permits and invoices and escrow instructions. She had 4 hours at my dining room table with a portable scanner. And Craig's signature was on it too. I want to tell you that the room spun. I want to tell you I stood up and knocked my coffee over and had some kind of dramatic physical response to what I was reading. What actually happened was quieter and worse than that. I just sat there, very still, and thought, he knew. And then I thought, or she forged him too. And then I thought, you are about to find out which one it is, and either answer is going to change your life. I picked up my phone. I did not call Craig. I called my real estate attorney. She had 2 hours before her next appointment. I talked for the first 20 minutes without stopping. And here is the thing my attorney said that I keep coming back to. Even now, she said, Rachel, in 15 years of practice, I have seen 3 cases like this. In all 3, the person who did it believed completely that they were entitled to what they took. She wasn't excusing it. She was preparing me, because what I was about to walk into was not a confrontation with someone who knew she'd done wrong. It was a confrontation with someone who had rewritten the story so many times that her version had become, to her, the only true one. I needed to understand that before I made a single move. I want to be careful here about what I knew versus what I could prove, because those are 2 different things, and I spent a long time as a professional learning to respect that line. What I knew was, a quitclaim deed had been recorded against our property without my knowledge or consent, bearing a signature that was not mine, notarized on a day I was hospitalized. What I could prove immediately was the hospitalization. I had the hospital records, the surgery report, the discharge paperwork. What I needed to find out was whether Craig had signed willingly, whether he'd known about the forged signature, and whether this was a civil matter or a criminal one. My attorney said, it's both. I drove home. Craig was already there. He finished earlier on Tuesdays. I walked in and set my laptop on the kitchen table, already open to the county recorder page, and I said, Craig, I need you to look at something. He looked. He stood there reading for long enough that I knew he was reading it twice. Then he set the laptop down, carefully, and took 1 step back from the table as if he needed distance from it. He looked at his hands. He did not look at me. I said, did you sign this? He said, Rachel. I said, that is a yes or no question. Did you sign a quitclaim deed transferring 25% of this house to your mother? He said, she said it was just a formality. She said it was for estate planning, that it would make things easier if something happened to one of us. She said it was just to protect the family. I said, Craig, I was in the hospital. My signature is on a document I signed while I was in the hospital. The look on his face, I've thought about it 100 times since. It wasn't the look of a man who knew. It was the look of a man who was realizing, in real time, what he had allowed to happen, which was, in its own way, just as devastating. He said, she told me you'd already signed it. She said you'd done it before you went into surgery, that you'd wanted to take care of it while it was on your mind. He stopped. He put both hands flat on the table. I didn't ask to see it. I signed where she pointed and I didn't ask. I said nothing. There was nothing to say to that yet. I called Patty that evening. I want you to know I did not do this impulsively. I had spoken with my attorney. I knew what I was and wasn't going to say, and I had made the decision that I would let Patty speak as much as she wanted to, because everything she said was going to matter later. Craig was sitting in the living room when I called. I did not put her on speaker. I listened. She answered on the second ring. "Rachel, honey, how are you feeling? You sounded tired last time we—" I said, "Patty, I pulled the title report on the house today." Silence, one beat, two. She said, "Oh." I said, "I need you to explain the quitclaim deed." She said, "And I am going to give you this word for word, because I have replayed it so many times it is simply part of my memory now," she said. "Rachel, I want you to understand that everything I have done has been for this family. Craig is my son. That house is his future. And honestly, after your surgery, when none of us knew what was going to happen, I just wanted to make sure that if the worst happened, Craig wouldn't lose his home in probate. I was protecting him. I would think you, of all people, would understand wanting to protect your family." I said, "My signature is on a document I did not sign." She said, "I had your power of attorney." I said, "No, Patty, you did not." There was a pause, and then she said, "Well, I thought Craig had handled that." Her voice hadn't changed. Warm, slightly concerned, faintly puzzled, as if she were describing a miscommunication about a dinner reservation. "I think there may have been some confusion about the paperwork. I certainly never intended for any of this to be upsetting. I was trying to help." That was the moment. Not the deed, not the forged signature, not even the phone call. That sentence, "I was trying to help," delivered in the same tone she used to tell me about contractor bids and detailed line items and everything she had ever inserted herself into. I thought about every time I had accepted that framing, every time I had told myself she meant well, every time I had let Craig tell me I was too sensitive. And then I said, very clearly, "I'm going to need you to understand that this is a legal matter now. My attorney will be in touch." And I hung up. What happened next took 7 months, and I am going to give it to you plainly because the details matter. My attorney filed a complaint with the Ada County Recorder's Office documenting the fraudulent notarization. Deborah Cross, the notary, the contractor's wife, was investigated and ultimately had her notary commission revoked by the Idaho Secretary of State's office. The quitclaim deed was challenged on the grounds of fraud and forgery, and after 4 months of back and forth during which Patty maintained through her own attorney that there had simply been a miscommunication about authorization, the deed was voided by court order. Our title went back to 2 owners, Craig and me. The title company that had processed the deed without adequate identity verification, without so much as a callback to confirm the grantor signatures, settled a separate complaint. The settlement was not large enough to feel like justice, but it was enough to cover every legal fee we had incurred, and then some, and my attorney made sure the settlement terms required the company to update their notarization verification procedures. That part mattered to me, not the money, the procedure. Because somewhere out there is another Rachel who hasn't pulled her title report yet. Patty was referred to the Ada County Prosecutor's Office for potential criminal charges related to the forged signature. As of the resolution of the civil matter, that investigation was still open. I cannot tell you how it ended because I genuinely do not know. What I can tell you is that the referral was made, it was documented, and it is part of the public record. Craig, I am not going to make Craig a villain, and I am not going to make him a hero. What he did was not what I would have chosen, and it cost him something real. He moved out of our house for 6 weeks while I decided what I wanted. He did not ask me to take him back during those 6 weeks, not once. He found a therapist on his own and went for 3 months before he asked, in a text message that I have also kept, whether I would be willing to try couples counseling at my timeline. I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 2 weeks. Then I said yes. In a therapist's office, about 4 months into the process, he said to me, "I made it easy for her to do this by never making it hard." That was the most honest thing I had ever heard him say, and it was the first moment I believed we might actually get somewhere. He told his mother, in writing, with me present at our kitchen table, that she had no further access to our property, our finances, or our legal documents, and he changed the locks that same afternoon. He did not defend her at any point in that conversation. He did not explain her. He sat next to me and he read what he had written, and his voice did not waver. We are still married. We are still working. Some days that feels like enough, and some days it doesn't. And I have made my peace with the fact that both of those things are true at the same time. The apple tree dropped its fruit again this past August, right on schedule, the way it always does. I was standing at the kitchen window, the new kitchen, the one we finished ourselves, the one Patty never got her hands on, and I watched the apples come down, and I thought about the first time I stood in that backyard and knew the house was ours. It still is. I made sure of that. I keep the folder in the top drawer of my desk because of what it represents about what I almost let happen, not to me, but to my own professional judgment. I knew how documents worked. I knew what a quitclaim deed was. I knew that access is not the same as trust, and I let Patty accumulate access because refusing it felt unkind. I had a standard I applied rigorously for every client I ever had, and I applied it nowhere in my own home. So here is what I want you to take away from this. Pull your title report. Today, it takes 10 minutes and most counties have it available online for free. Know what is on your deed. Know who has copies of your documents. Know who has your signature anywhere on anything. And understand that someone can love your family and still be quietly building a claim on it at the same time. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. Patty loved Craig. I believe that completely. She just loved her position in his life a little bit more. The document doesn't lie. It never does.